the mindset element and the investing expert side that has been a foundation of this podcast. And as I started coaching more and more, I noticed that I was changing. And as I did more of my inner work, I could see how I was shifting. I found myself in this really interesting situation where I really needed to ask questions because I myself was still learning. And I didn't give myself the space. So this is where my ego has grown. Since then, I was doing so much inner development that it's crazy to think that version of me only 5 years ago wasn't strong enough to say, it's okay. I don't need to worry about what other people think of me. I simply need to do what is necessary, right? Do what is required. Welcome back, or welcome to the Conscious Investor Podcast, the show where we talk about health, mindset, and wealth building strategies. Happy birthday, Conscious Investor. I can't thank you enough for hanging out with me for the past 5 years. I cannot believe it's been 5 years. It feels like just a couple of days ago, we were here celebrating the Conscious Investor birthday. And of course, as always, for the birthday, I have something special if you're watching online. I actually pulled out the Holly family happy birthday candle, something we pull out for the birthday month. And I'm so excited. Instead of having something sweet and delicious, I decided to just have the candle 0-calorie celebration. So celebrate with me, Conscious Investor, because we create this podcast together and we're in this to win this together. Conscious Investor, today, as we celebrate the birthday, as we do, it's kind of like an annual report, a where are we state of the Conscious Investor podcast. I want to do a recap because we have so many new conscious investors in the community. So I want to do a recap because many of you weren't here in year number 5. And this is an opportunity for you to kind of hear the origin story in a nutshell. I want to talk about where we are. And as always, at this time of year, I let you know where the commitment is for the next 12 months because every year for the last 5 years, I've given myself permission that I can sunset the show at any given point, provided it's this time of year. It's almost like I sign a contract with myself and with you. You're not really signing on it, but I'm committing to you that I am going to create the show and be available for the next year or not. And at some point, the reality is at some point, something will happen and I will sunset the show. So we are going to talk about where we were, where we are now, and where we're headed. And in this process of discussing this, it's really going to be a role model and an opportunity for you to do some of your own reflection, evaluation, and projection as to where you want to be in your future. So let's go ahead and dive on in. Way back when in 2019, I decided that I wanted to launch a podcast. And why did I do that? Well, I live in the middle of nowhere, far north Idaho. And where I live, I don't have access to the meetup groups. In fact, at the time of this recording, just a couple nights ago, I spent 5+ hours in a car just driving to and from a meetup group that I was presenting at. And so it is cumbersome. And I was still a public school teacher. So I definitely couldn't spend all those hours in the car on a weekday, trying to make this work. And so I thought outside of the box. And I want you to think right now, Conscious Investor, you face friction in your life. Friction is just part of life. It's not something bad. You didn't draw the short straw. It's just part of life. So whatever it is that you are facing right now, I want you to think, what's my creative solution in this moment? What can I do that's thinking outside the box? For me, as that school teacher back in 2019, my thinking was, I love listening to podcasts and I could start a podcast and I could create a win-win-win which is what I love to do. And I could interview amazing guests who are experts and elite people in the real estate investing space. And I could ask them all the questions that I had since I was investing in a new way. And on top of that, I could then serve you, conscious investor, and I could share that conversation with the world because you know my philosophy. If one person is thinking it, there are a lot more people thinking it. And so I launched my initial podcast, and that was called Ask Me How I Know Multifamily Stories of Struggle to Success. That is a mouthful. It was supposed to be SEO rich and optimized and highly searchable so that you would find it. I had very, very, very good intentions about that. I remember I went to my very first real estate conference with Super Ad Steve. It was in Dallas. And I remember going there and feeling so awkward and so out of place. And yet we went, and then I saw some podcasters, and I'm like, oh, you. And I asked them so many questions. And that was in the fall. And then over Christmas break, I spent a cumbersome, painless time learning about podcasting. And I was creating an intro and an outro and learning how to blend this music and these words and how to export it and there was so much learning. I cannot overemphasize how many times I cried through that experience and how many times I wanted to quit. Right now, maybe you are in the throes of something that you want to do, but it is so cumbersome and it is demanding so much of you that you want to quit. There's that whole the fable, and it's called Acres of Diamonds, and we've seen lots of those memes where the person is mining and they quit. There's one person in the picture and they quit and they're walking away, and just you can see it, just like if they keep mining just a little bit further, they would have like the whole cache of diamonds at their disposal. And I want you to know, conscious investor, if you are in that moment where you feel like quitting, you might be wanting to quit on your wish, quitting on a work project. You may be feeling like, I just want to be quitting on this relationship. All of these things are like feelings that people feel. And I want you to know that persevering, being resilient, and seeing things through, it opens up so many doors. And most importantly, it opens up this whole window into your potential and into who you are. So when that's really one of the first times I can really remember going, oh, I went through the emotional cycle of change. I went from uninformed optimism. I just nosedived into the whole trough of despair. And then from that trough of despair, through lots of tears, lots of hours, lots of pain, I climbed my way out and I ended up on the side of informed optimism. In that process, it transformed me from the inside out. And I've been through that process multiple times throughout my life. It's just now I have a way of talking about it. And so if you're in that moment right now where you're like, I feel like quitting, you're just down there in the trough of despair and you don't want to cycle back up to uninformed optimism. You want to do the work. You want to put in the reps so you can come out on the other side. I promise you, it is absolutely worth it. I will say in those early days, I was so intimidated inviting elite guests. I was shocked that they would say yes to coming on my show. It was extraordinary. And I'm going to share something I've never shared. In 5 years, I've never shared how much pressure it ended up putting on me. And although I positioned the show and I would remind you, hey, I'm not the expert. I do know real estate, but I am new to this type of real estate investing. And in that process, I would be in different groups and different settings. And just by way, it's that whole thing where whoever you surround yourself with, you become associated with. And so, by nature of having a podcast, of having so many amazing guests on the show, people expected a lot more from me. And so I found myself in this really interesting situation where I really needed to ask questions because I myself was still learning and I didn't give myself the space. So this is where my ego has grown. Since then, I was doing so much inner development that it's crazy to think that version of me only 5 years ago wasn't strong enough to say, It's okay. I don't need to worry about what other people think of me. I simply need to do what is necessary, right? Do what is required." And so I wasn't asking the questions publicly that now I would ask publicly. I'm super transparent. And yet back then, I had a level of restraint within me. So I think that's really fascinating when I look back. And I can see the growth and the transition out of that. 2 years into the show, I felt a little disconnected. I could feel the shift. I was coaching on the mindset and human potential side. And I love that. And from the very get go, Mindset Mondays. And then we had an interview. And it's been on Thursdays for years now, but initially I think it was on Wednesdays. And all this to say, the mindset element and the investing expert side, that has been a foundation of this podcast. And as I started coaching more and more, I noticed that I was changing. And as I did more of my inner work, I could see how I was shifting. And I was hiking with a good friend of mine, Austin Linney. He and his now wife were up visiting, escaping the fires. And I share this story because it's so important to think about the influence of the people in your life. And we went on this hike, and I remember he's like, "Hey, so how did you tell Cassidy what your podcast is about?" And I stumbled over my words, and he said, "So it's about conscious investing." And the entire hike, we talked about conscious investing, and we literally rebranded the podcast on that hike into The Conscious Investor. And it feels so deeply aligned. It has been such a like, this is home. And yet it's really fascinating. Even an hour ago, I was on the phone, and someone, and this happens all the time, was kind of associating conscious investor with impact investing. And I find that very fascinating. It's definitely a good correlation, but I find myself always needing to do some of that. Hey, well, actually, I do believe in impact investing. And the conscious investor is really about health, mindset, and wealth building strategies. It's about personal freedom and not just bankrupting our life chasing after financial freedom. And it's really an interesting position. And you might find yourself in one of those positions in life where you know that you have changed and you can feel that change. You might not be able to articulate that change, but you know it's there and you want to make this transition, but you don't know how. And I want to encourage you that making transitions and giving yourself that permission to make a transition is really critical. It's really important for you to be able to iterate. Now, I'm going to put it this way. I don't agree with lifestyle choices and messaging and things like that from the people I'm going to mention, but they are role models when it comes to permission to adapt and iterate and transform. And when I look at people like Madonna or I look at Taylor Swift, you can see how they have given themselves space to transition over the decades of their life. And it's so critical that we do this. We're not created as this one dimensional or even 2D person. God created us with so much potential within us, and we don't want to miss out. I've used two analogies, and I hope that these resonate with you still and that they sink in. And I hope that you feel comfortable borrowing them or adopting them as yours and sharing them, because the first one is not mine. It's something that my best friend shared with me. And that's the Mr. Potato Head analogy, right? Like, we are all like Mr. Potato Heads we played with when we were kids, where you would open up the back and it had accessories in there and a different nose, different ears, different lips, and you could adapt that Mr. Potato Head or Mrs. Potato Head, whichever one it was. You can adapt it and play with it. And that's what we should be doing with ourselves. We don't want to be wearing the exact same eyes all our entire life. We have so much more within us. And usually it's us preventing ourselves and not giving ourselves permission to be able to tap into those other versions of who we are. those are authentic versions. Sometimes I do my hair one way and sometimes it's another way. And sometimes, right, we can do this with our physical appearance, but guess what? We're not changing and being disingenuous um, when we may find ourselves laughing at different things or find ourselves drawn to different people at different times of our journey. And sometimes I find people want to assume that that is bad and that they need to just like stay with the same group their whole life. Like, well, actually, all of our friendships are going to adapt and adjust over our lifetime. Very few of those friendships are going to be, kind of cradle to grave sort of friendships. And so we want to give ourselves permission in every part of our life to be able to adapt and adjust and grow. The other analogy that I absolutely love is a disco ball. You've heard me mention this one recently, but I love all the facets on a disco ball. I don't dance, so it's really funny that I love the disco ball analogy so much. But if you shine a light, those disco balls are filled with just hundreds of facets around that disco ball. And each of those facets reflects the world around it in a different way. And it depends on where you're at even distance-wise, what that reflection looks like and such. We could go really deep into this analogy. And so I wanna encourage you to think also of yourself as a disco ball. You are multifaceted. You are not just one single mirrored piece of particle. You have hundreds of different parts of who you are. And we have been blessed with a lifetime to play and discover and to experiment with the different parts of who we are created and designed to be. So as I think about that, and I hope that you are internalizing this and that you're saying, giving yourself that challenge, like, where am I stagnating? Where am I being static instead of being dynamic? Where I'm stretching and I'm expanding. Like, I want to stretch and expand and just take that time to do some reflection work and to identify where you may have been stunted a little bit and where you can enact that growth back into your life. In that vein, conscious investor, and we think about where we're headed on the show, we're headed in a really, really interesting direction. And I can tell that it's really interesting because when we made that transition together from Ask Me How I Know, multifamily stories of struggle to success, to the conscious investor, I remember there were a lot of feelings leading into that were preparing me for that transition. And I remember that transition being emotional because there's so much content tied to the original version. And when I am looking to the future and looking at what we're creating and what this looks like, I want you to know I'm going to be around for another year. Content is already being recorded. And I also want you to know that that year is going to look different. So I can tell, like, I recorded this a few days ago and I was like, actually, I need to adjust this recording a bit. And yet the same thing is happening. I'm getting glossy eyed and it's emotional because there's so much tied and associated with the conscious investor. What I do want you to know, conscious investor, is that the conscious investor is not going away. That is a philosophy. And that I think is one of the most important things that has come out of the last 2.5 years is that I very much have refined that philosophy. It did not exist before. And now there's this whole philosophy out there about a conscious investor. And it's such an important philosophy and anchor and tenet. And I think the last 2.5 years has really been intended to become crystal clear as to my investment philosophy and how that looks in life and what the values are. And having that personal freedom as the anchor instead of financial freedom. It was really the breakaway from the investing space that I initially entered into and that drive for financial freedom And realizing that there are so many people that have financial freedom, but they're still shackled inside. And so transitioning to the conscious investor was such a great place for us to settle for the last 2.5 years and to refine and distill and really understand, because it's that transition. Let's really make sure that we are focusing on our personal freedom in the wealth building strategies, all the financial freedom. That is awesome, and we should pursue those elements, and we need to make sure that we have our priorities right. So I love where the conscious investor is within this brand that has grown and expanded. In fact, the brand actually started with Three Keys Investments. That's where this whole thing started. That was the mothership, and the podcast was beneath that, intended to serve Three Keys Investments. So it's very interesting to see how brands evolve, and if we're willing to allow ourselves and give ourselves permission to adapt, what can transpire. So there is a big change, and it is coming. And I didn't want to slap it on here, as the hey, happy fifth birthday, and it's all new. But there is a huge change that is coming down the pipe. And I want to share with you about where that change is coming from, and what I've learned and how that affects us. Um, in such a beautiful way. Like it's kind of this bittersweet. It's so bittersweet, right? Like any type of transition like this is very bittersweet. And as I'm transitioning over the last couple of years, I've spent more and more time building out my coaching practice. And I find myself leaning more and more, further and further into the coaching practice. And it feels so natural and rewarding. I remember my first coach telling me, like, and encouraging me and saying, like, you are a coach, you need to be doing this. It's natural for you. And I didn't believe my coach for an entire year. And then I realized that I was coaching for free. I realized that is that thing that I do. And I've spent so much time, studying, and it's continual learning. Because I'm always want to be improving my coaching, skills and my toolbox. And so in this process of coaching and just finding that as like such a beautiful place, and seeing my clients overcome so much, right? And so so much of the coaching, I mean, helping people transition out of from one career into another, helping clients transition from being W-2 employees to being their own business owners and being successful with that. Working with coaching clients who have going through hard things in their personal life, and being able to support them and give them perspective and tools to navigate those challenges that life throws at us at times. And I love it. I could coach all day long, and I've done it. And then I feel energized at the end. And so you're in the right zone when that is what's taking place. I also know that I love all the topics that we talk about with health, mindset, wealth when we're talking about the conscious investor. One of the big things that has taken place, and I've spoken about it on the podcast, and it's interesting the timing of everything, because this decision was being made before I can see the underpinnings of it, but it's just there have been more and more things that have solidified it. So in 2024, I almost sunset the Three Keys Investments public facing investments, and I almost did that in 2024, and I chose not to. And I'm glad that I didn't, because we have a couple of really great investments that we picked up in 2024. And then what I have found is I'm spread thin. I'm spread across a lot of boards, and a lot of people don't know what box to put me in, because I'm blessed to be successful in these different modalities within the investing space, within the coaching space. And so it makes it a little complicated sometimes for people to go like, so what is it you actually do? And like, I kind of do a lot of cool things. Um, and then with last fall when I started learning about what was taking place on our multifamily portfolio and the challenges that we are facing in that portfolio and within that partnership, that amount of stress, it was like, okay, what is one's bandwidth and what is enough? We've spoken about that before on the podcast. Like, okay, so if you can be a Renaissance woman, but like what is enough? And I realized that in order for me to have capacity to be able to serve people in the way I want to serve, I do have to make sure that I'm not spread too thin. And so in 2025, I've made a very bold decision to not have public facing investments. And this is the first time I've announced this publicly. I value you, conscious investor. You've been here. We've been here together for the last 5 years. And so I want you to be the first to know. And I don't want you to see something over on social platforms before I talk to you about this. But yeah, this is 2025 is a year where I am choosing to not syndicate any investments. I want to focus on the current portfolio. I also want to make sure I have bandwidth for what we currently have within the portfolio. I am intending to continue to invest. I'm going to invest in a very private way, in a much smaller way where I may have some private investors that simply want to still be passive, but they want to be in something smaller that provides cash flow and appreciation, things of that nature. But I'm not going to do any large scale syndications. There's so much more about that. And I know that I have been fairly open, as open as I can be, right? Because there are some legal requirements where I can't be like massively open about nuances and intricacies publicly. But I do want you to know that even that is a pretty bold move. There are a lot of bold moves that I'm doing with this that aren't normal. And I'm sure some people will have opinions about that, and that's okay. My conviction right now is that there are a lot of things that are not public facing that I'm aware of outside of my own investment portfolio. And my hope would be that we would all act as general partners, that we would all act in a very conscientious way to ensure that we are protecting our investors. I do have one investment, our ground up development, that I'm going to finish out. So it's not a new investment, but we're going to be closing out our HUD loan and breaking ground. And so that's super exciting. There is space for accredited investors if you're interested. It's really a great investment. It has taken a long time to get off the ground, and I'm so excited to have that momentum picking up this year. So you can hear there are a lot of changes. The transitions were already taking place. I was really honestly in a lot of denial. And with all of these changes, it really felt very suiting for me to also make a transition. And the show is going to transition. Now, what that looks like for everyone here, right? For us is I'm still going to do Mindset Mondays. I'm still going to have investor or interviews with experts in the areas of health, mindset, and wealth building strategies. However, I am going to shift the title of the show. I'm going to shift the cover art, and that part of it is a part where you're going to see a shift. And so I hope that you hang with me. My goal in doing this shift is to really, a lot of people don't know how to categorize Julie Holly. Some people call it like you have this Julie Holly effect on people, and it's true. I'm around people, and most of the time, if people, I'm like, you don't want to tell me that. Like, if you're going to tell me you really want to do something, I'm going to help you and you're going to go do it. And it happens, people do things where they come to me and it's like 2 months later, they're completely transitioned and on the path that they really wanted to be on. And so the Julie Holly show, the transition where we're headed is, I think it's going to be fun. And I think it's also going to open up the opportunity to bring on some guests that I'm really excited to bring on the show and that I want to bring on the show. But the conscious investor really isn't going to be in alignment with their branding, their messaging. It won't resonate. And so coming onto almost like a variety show, which is what this is really, right? Coming onto the variety show is going to be really exciting for a lot of guests. I'm so excited to really double down on the health element. Health is something that I take seriously. I've taken it more and more seriously and have made some very bold moves in my life in that regard also. And those are things that I think as we transition into the Julie Holly show, those are things I want to share more about with you because I think that so often we have these shared journeys. They're like parallel journeys and they're not the same, but they're similar enough to where we can grow with each other. And so I really want to share parts of that journey with you. Additionally, I really want Super Red Steve to come on the show more. We've been doing so much within our marriage, and as we come into year 19 of being married, but like year 21 of being together, we've learned a lot. And his inner work just continues to just be such a blessing. It's so exciting. If you have a spouse and that spouse is maybe you've done a lot of inner work, a lot of personal development, and you've been just like, come on, honey. Can you please just come on, please. Please read this book. Please listen to this podcast. Please do the work. I want to encourage you that it's worthwhile to just be patient, continue to do your inner work. And there was a lot of patience. And I'm excited because Super Red Steve is just like so on this really cool journey. And so I really want to bring him into the show more and incorporate him into the show so that we can serve you together. And so we're gonna have a fun time. It's going to be a fun transition. I'm excited about it. And I'm excited about year number 5. Like we're doing this thing. We have over 570 episodes. We've had 3 conscious, I guess, when this is released, this coming weekend, I'll see a lot of you on Thursday. We're going to be at the Conscious Investor Growth Summit number 3. If you don't have tickets and you're listening to this right now and you can make it, I will figure out a way for you to come. Like, like if the website is shut down, because it might be shut down for tickets at that point. Like, just shoot me a message over on Facebook Messenger or Instagram and at Happy Julie Holly, and we'll figure out a way. Like, it's going to be so off the hook, so epic, so powerful. You don't want to miss it. I know I keep saying that, but the types of speakers and the caliber of the content that we're going to be around is so powerful. So yeah, we're doing this thing. We have so much going on in so much momentum with the content that we've created, and so many cool guests that I think that you're going to gain and grow from. I'm just excited about the next year. That's where I'm like, I don't know what the next year, how it actually unfolds, but I already know what I want to, how I want to serve you this year. And especially as I start transitioning into building out and like really leveling up the wish fulfillment coaching system. I'm so excited to do that. And so I'm going to wrap up with this and just let you know that the wish fulfillment cohorts are going to launch. We're going to have them launch the 3rd week of March, and we'll meet the 1st and 3rd week. It's a 3-month program, and we're going to step into that. And if you have something that you want to bring to reality and it just feels out of reach, this is for you. And this is my expertise. This is what I've helped people do for years. And I'm going to support you and take you through the framework that has helped so many other people close that gap between a wish and reality. And so you want to definitely be in on that. I think we'll have a link down in the show notes that will be a way for you to sign up or be on the wait list. The other element is maybe you have already brought something that felt larger than life to reality. I'm going to be opening up the Wishmaker Circle, and that is a mastermind. And it's not a mastermind for just anyone. It is application based only, and it's a place where those of us who are on the other side of emotional cycle of change, where we have that informed optimism because we have walked through that trough of despair. We have climbed our way out and we know what it's like on the other side. This is a place for you. And it's very intentional because there's something that happens in that process that I've already mentioned earlier in the podcast episode. And I know that I want to be around some other people who have that because the conversations are different. They're just very, very different. And so, and our capacity for our next, closing the gap between wish and reality, that also looks very different than when we are working on our very first wishes and figuring it out, that process. And so this is going to be a reserved group. It's not a mastermind like those masterminds where people are just, hey, join this, $30,000 mastermind just so you can be in this social club. That's not what this is about. And that's why it's really small, it's intimate, and it's going to be such a supportive community. So if that's resonating with you, also down in the show notes, we will have a link so that you can either be on the wait list or apply. Again, this episode's coming out just in the future, and so I wanted to make sure. I'm like, I think that's how we're going, but we're still solidifying a couple of these avenues for you. Conscious investor, I appreciate you. One of the things that I definitely value and have appreciated over the years is that you have supported the show for in the free way of, hey, Julie, I'm going to give you a follow. I'm going to give you a rating and a review. I'm going to share this podcast or this particular episode with my friends and people that come to mind when I'm listening to that episode. It means the absolute world to me. And if you've been a guest on the Conscious Investor podcast, I am so incredibly grateful for you. This show would not be what it is without your input and your influence and your voice. And I'm so grateful for you. Conscious Investor, I'm going to see you on the other side. And until next time, remember, life is a limited time offer. So invest it well.